that was the genesis of the SOC solution that we have today. And soon after that, we had 4 or 5 customers that moved very quickly working with Archer to build SOC solutions, and today many of you have our SOC solution in place. Okay? So what makes Archer unique is not those 7 solutions that we're talking about here. It's this concept that we call the Archer SmartSuite Framework. And this framework, think of it as a rapid application development framework to build applications. Think of it as business process automation. And how we got to this concept, I can still think back to Leslie Norwood from EDS. And Leslie, I didn't see you raise your hand before. Are you in the audience? All right, see you here in the back. So when we first implemented policy for EDS, and they had defined all of the fields that they want on the page and how they want it to look when a user goes to put content in, and sometimes they had radio buttons, sometimes checkboxes, sometimes drop-down boxes. And every time I'd go visit Leslie, she goes, man, this is great, but can you change those radio buttons to a drop-down list, or can you change those checkboxes to a different type of control? And every time I would go visit with EDS, they would want to add another field or change the way another field looked. And I kept coming back to the office and talking with our engineers and saying, guys, it seems like that's just a simple request. Can't you just make that happen? And the answer to that was that it wasn't such a simple request, and we needed to rethink the way that we were going to build products at that time. This is back in 2001. So what we came up with at that time was called the Archer SmartSuite Framework. And it provides you the ability to go in and build on-demand applications, and at that time, or configure the existing solutions that Archer has, and to go in and make it yours. So you can take the fields and move them around on the page so that they fit the style that you want to have, so that I guarantee you that there's not too many customers in this room that have policy that have it configured with the layout on the page exactly the same. Everybody has a little bit different format on the way that you want information organized. You also want control over the fields of information that you're collecting on those forms. Some companies have 10 fields, some companies have 900 fields in a form. It can vary that broadly. You also have different access rights and permissions that you need to be dynamic, and you need to be able to change those permissions based on those fields. So that's where the initial idea for the framework came. So the framework, from the initial ideas that we had, was to build something that it didn't take a developer to go in and configure to build out and automate new business processes. In fact, I sat right in the middle of the engineering team, and we worked with the developers, and until I could use it and it made sense to me, it wasn't good yet. And that frustrated the heck out of a lot of those guys, and there's a couple of them that are probably from Archer here in the room today that can attest to that. But that forced us to build something that was end-user focused, something that people in this room could set down and model out process, all the way from the CISO, like Bill Linder at Wells Fargo, that likes to jump in and configure things, all the way down to a very technical Archer admin that you may have on your team. Right? But it wasn't meant so that people in this room couldn't use it. We wanted you to use it from day one. And over time, that's grown. So it started off with building applications. We added workflow components to that. There was a period of time when risk started getting really hot where we added the ability to do calculations just like you do in Excel directly in the product. We added things called data-driven events to do some really complex workflow processes that you needed to do. There's an appearance module that allows you to brand the application specific to your company, not to Archer. So one thing that you should know if you've purchased Archer recently is the very first thing you should do is get that branding right. Go into the appearance module, understand what your corporate standards are, and make that product look like your own. And I can tell you, in working with EDS and Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse, that when we talk with end users, they didn't want to see a product from Archer. They wanted to see a product from their company that they went in and used. So that's where the appearance module came from for us. And there's things such as notifications, that anytime that certain events take place inside of the content, that you can send notifications to certain people, again, around workflow. And then the last piece is that we got really good with the framework of building things. Then we needed the ability to do some custom things at times. And we didn't want to have separate code bases at all of your organizations. In fact, every organization that's here today runs on a single code base inside of the Archer SmartSuite Framework. There's no custom code for any of the 7 solutions that we have. They're all just configurations of the framework, all drag and drop type features that you use for that. But the Archer API allows you to then begin to do integrations with systems that you may have, like other asset management systems, vulnerability scanning systems, HR systems, to pull data in and to get data back out of Archer. We've also, we'll be announcing here at the summit in version 2 of our product, we have the next iteration, the next version of the Archer API, which is called Data Feed our data feed services. And what that allows you to do, it's a web-based user interface to do some very complex data imports. So it would allow you to pull up an interface, look at an application inside of Archer. It tells you here are all the fields in Archer by field type. Be able to look at the source data that you want to bring in, map those fields together, set up a schedule on when do I want to do that integration, once a day, once an hour, once a month, and then let it run. And it's much more complicated than what I just said, and if that's something that you're interested in, there's an entire session that's led by our VP of Products here this week that will go in and show you how to set that up and use it. And that version of Archer came as part of a partnership that we had with Nokia. And I think that Jay Leek's going to be up on the stage here in a little bit and is actually presenting in a session. And they had some very, very complex data sources that they wanted to bring into Archer. In fact, they had 7 different sources that they wanted to bring in to be able to do some correlation to make some decisions around risk. I think they had Foundstone and InCircle and a couple homegrown systems and maybe NetIQ, and I'll let Jay tell that story. But what they came back and said was, we don't want to use the API to do that every time with all that techno. Could you build something that's simpler for us to use, so we need to make a modification, a member of our team can go in and make the modification. We don't have to have a developer use the API to do it, right? So that's where we're at with the Archer SmartSuite Framework today. That's the single biggest thing that sets our company apart, is that we built the framework first, and then all 7 of those solutions that we offer today sit on top of that framework. Now, where our customers are at today is that you've came to us, and an average customer has implemented 4 to 5 of our core solutions, and then you begin to solve other business problems using the framework, and we call those on-demand applications. So you've implemented other on-demand applications, and this is representative of a profile of one specific customer, a financial services company out of New York, on how they've used Archer. So on that outside ring, you see all the different uses that they have in place. Over the last year, we've had the opportunity to go visit with 40 or 50 of our customers and to document all of the custom, what we at the time we called custom modules, we now call on-demand applications, all those on-demand applications that you've built. And just across this cross-section of those customers, there's 700 different applications that you've built on top of our framework, in addition to the 7 that we offer today, right? So we're seeing that the value in solving enterprise risk and compliance problems is growing outside of those 7 core that we originally did. And I call those 7 core solutions that we offer sometimes mega processes. Think of those as the biggest processes that you have in the organization from a risk and compliance standpoint. But there's a lot of other processes that sometimes just as important that you need to have in place, and the Archer framework gives you the ability to create those. So that takes us to where we're at today. We're, back in 2002, we started to see people beginning to want to use on-demand applications. In fact, we had our first user group conference, and we had the ability to sit down with American Express and Wells Fargo, and Bill Linder, who couldn't make it today, who's the CISO at Wells Fargo. I really wish he could be here, and John Kirkwood. Is John over here? If you move, yeah, raise your hand. They got together with me and said, John, this is some great stuff, but we need a way to share it. I'm building some applications, and Bill Linder's building some applications, and how can we share those back and forth? In fact, we need to share them between our own environments. When I'm in a test environment, I need to move it into a staging and then into a production. How can we do that with Archer? So that was the genesis of what we called at the time module import-export. We now call application import-export. It allows you to take an application, import it out of your environment into a structure that can be imported back into a new environment, right? And over time, and at that time, Archer was the facilitator to make that happen. You would call us, and if one company wanted to share an application with another company, a lot of times they would call me. I would say, here's who maybe has that. Maybe you can go talk with this person, and then we would help facilitate that. And over time, what we found is that more and more people started asking us to share that information. So this is just a small group of Archer customers that at some point in time have talked to us about sharing some type of information in Archer with other customers. And that's the genesis of what we want to talk about today, which is an ecosystem that you are asking for, where we could bring together the power of this group and the things that you're doing, and when it's not competitive in nature, you could share that with one another. So you could more rapidly deploy new applications and bring them to market. And when you ask when we sat down and had the opportunity to talk with many of you, you begin to break it down into 4 different segments of sharing that you wanted to do. The very